Okay, it is 1:30. My name is Brenda Watson, and we are going to call this meeting to order. For now, we'd like to begin with any public comments. If anyone would like to make any comments from the public, this is the time. Okay, hearing none, we're going to move on to the next item on the agenda. I'd like to request a motion to approve the meeting minutes from December 20th.
So moved. John Harity.
All right. Is there a second? I'll second. This is Brenda. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Nays? Abstentions? All right, motion passes.
All right.
Going to turn it over now to, am I turning this over to Philip Jordan to review
Yeah.
the energy jobs report?
Yeah, let me do it. Just a quick introduction here, Watson. I just wanted to give folks some background in case you haven't been with us for the last couple of years. So Philip Jordan, who I'm going to introduce in a second, has been instrumental, he and his team, in providing us data to track clean energy jobs in Connecticut. So these are 4 of the reports that we've issued the last 4 years. This has been a collaboration of the Joint Committee, the EEB, the Green Bank Board, and our utility partners, Eversource and Avangrid. So we are now looking at 2024 data, and I'm going to introduce our colleague, Philip Jordan, again, who's been with us all along, he and his team, as they looked at 2024 data. So Philip, why don't I turn it over to you? We've got your slides all on here.
Great. Thank you so much. Great to see you, Brian. And thanks everybody for having us here today to talk about this exciting 2024 Clean Energy Jobs Report. I'm really excited to be working yet again with the state of Connecticut and this group on, we think, some really important data and some good key findings about what's happening in the energy sector in Connecticut. Also, I always search for a little bit of innovation activity, and if I spend a little bit more time looking to see what happened at my alma mater, the University of Connecticut, I may spend a little bit more time looking on that, but that's mostly out of a personal curiosity and excitement for what's happening in the state. So today we're going to walk through sort of the research and some overall findings. And then I'm going to hopefully have a few minutes left over for any questions. Then also happy to answer any questions throughout if people want to interrupt if anything that I talk about is confusing. If you could just maybe use the hand function, and then somebody can just yell at me if I need to stop and answer a question. As Brian mentioned, this is the 5th annual Clean Energy Industry Report. And what we look at are sort of clean energy and traditional energy employment trends across lots of different technology sectors. We do look at that innovation aspect in particular, but we also are looking at all the different value chain activities, including construction and repair and maintenance, manufacturing, wholesale trade, utilities, et cetera. So really looking across all those sectors. And the underlying data come from the U.S. Energy Employment Report, which is a survey of tens of thousands of businesses across the U.S. And there were 593 Connecticut business establishments that participated in the survey in the last year in full. So there are many more that sort of provide either partial responses or other components, but 593 took the entirety of the survey, which provides about a 4% margin of error for the state. So just to give you a little sense of the background. If we go to the next slide, we can look at some of the overall employment trends that exist. And I think a couple of really exciting findings here. So, the first thing you'll notice when you look at the graph is that, the COVID-19 shutdown and pandemic really impacted the clean energy sector. A lot of that is because a significant growth area and the largest segment of clean energy jobs is in the energy efficiency space in buildings. And particularly, 2 things really happened. One is that so commercial and office space tenancies have been sort of all over the map, and there's been a lot of questions about, how much space do companies really need, how much investment do they want to put into physical office space, sort of navigating the remote, hybrid, et cetera, opportunities, but also really the residential energy efficiency was deeply impacted by COVID, as potential customers were a lot more hesitant about having people in their homes during COVID-19. And then there's a sort of a period of time where you have to sort of get back into the rhythm and get your your marketing funnel and your sales funnel moving again as a business. There are also definitely some challenges around finding workers, which we'll get to in a little bit, but that has been a challenge as the construction industry has grown generally. For a lot of these energy efficiency employers, they have not been able to find enough people to grow as quickly as they want to. But here we have 46,000 jobs overall in clean energy, 4% growth, which is really great, the strongest since 2015, since we started looking at this. So a very good growth year. And clean energy jobs now represent 2.7% of the total jobs in the state. That's a pretty significant number, and that's as of the end of 2023. Now, one thing to note is that I remember in 2011 when I wrote the first clean energy industry report for any state, which was in Massachusetts, there was great fanfare over 2.1%. And I see a hand raised, so I'll stop here.
Yes, hi, this is John Harity. I'm just wondering, with the 2.7% figure, how that compares to other states in the region or nationally or whatever.
Yeah, so that's certainly above average nationally. The region sort of has, so it's the region is a little bit challenging because you a state like Vermont, which just doesn't have a lot of jobs overall, and compared to a state like Connecticut. So Vermont has a very high percentage of its. It's the highest percentage in New England.
And what is their figure?
I think it's close to 4% in Vermont, but 2.7 is definitely above average nationwide, and pretty consistent. So I was going to say that 14 years ago, Massachusetts had all this fanfare about it being about 2% of their state economy, and it had grown, but as with the overall job economy, so 2.7% is definitely viewed as a large and growing number, and obviously the 46,000 as the absolute number is the most that we've had in Connecticut. That compares to the low six figures in 120,000, 120 to 130,000 depending on how you count in Massachusetts, for example. And New York has been growing fairly dramatically, but these are states that are a bit larger in terms of their, which is why we give that number, because they have more jobs in total. So definitely an above average state and a positive growth trend.
Thank you.
Sure. So one question. So you said that 2.7% is about 46,000 jobs?
Yes.
And so how many jobs do we need to fill? Like how many jobs are left vacant?
Oh, right. Yeah. So that's so the way that we ask that question is about difficulty. And so we will get into the difficulty. This is not like a JOLT survey, so we're not asking like how many current openings do you have that you need to fill. It's more about how difficult is it for you to find workers. So Connecticut, I'm not sure exactly what is happening with it in the moment, but Connecticut, as part of the CCAP program for CPRG, will be doing sort of a comprehensive modeling effort and workforce needs assessment. If that continues to go forward, I think with the uncertainty of funding in Washington, a lot of states are paused, and I think I've heard that Connecticut is paused on that. But there will be actually a model that looks at how many jobs will be needed each year, and then this will be really helpful to be able to track against that, which is something that Massachusetts and New York are able to do at the moment because they spent the funds to do the modeling already. I think it was statutorily required, so they sort of moved forward with it. And in Connecticut, I think was sort of waiting to see if the funds actually get expended.
Thank you.
And I see another hand up as well. I don't. It's BT, I think.
Yeah. Hi. Sorry, it's Becca. Oh,
Hey,
apologies.
Becca.
I didn't realize my camera wasn't even on. I just wanted to have a better sense of what you meant for the definition of jobs. Like, is this is this FTE? Is this just any partial
Right.
person working on it? Like, just help me understand.
Yeah, sure. So this is these numbers are all, whether we're talking about total jobs or the jobs in clean energy, they're all based on the definitions used by the Bureau of Labor Statistics for the quarterly census of employment and wages. So it is a position in a company. So that can mean, so it is not FTEs. It is number of people working in a job. So it includes just like the BLS data and the total that we compare, the 2.7. It includes part-time positions. It includes all industries and all covered employment. So what that means is it does not include all sole proprietors if they're not incorporated or paying W-2 wages. And it does not include like railroads. There's a couple of other very specific industries that are not covered. So yeah, this analysis that's done for the Department of Energy at the national level and where we pull the data from it functions sort of like a filter of the Bureau of Labor Statistics quarterly data. So we'll say this is the economy. We're not remaking that. We're trying to determine how many jobs within these categories are connected to clean energy. The definition of clean energy includes really three major categories of what we call sort of supply side sectors. So it includes all of the electric power generation, it includes all the fuels, and then transmission, distribution, and storage. And then within that, there are, what you determine as being clean or traditional for this report, which we can talk about when we get into those numbers a bit. And then there's two major demand sectors, which is efficiency in buildings and motor vehicles. So alternative fuel vehicles. Okay, why don't we go to the next slide? Great. So here we have, this is that regional employment change by region. So we have seen, as you mentioned, New York and actually the nation grew really, really quickly. Connecticut's growth over the year was similar to Massachusetts, but outpacing other states in the region, and also outpacing the overall economy of job growth and clean energy. So what this means is that all jobs grew by 1.4% in Connecticut, but clean energy jobs grew by 3.9%. So it's growing faster than all jobs in the economy. On the next slide, we look at the technology breakdown. And so, as I mentioned, energy efficiency is by far the largest category. We still have not returned to pre-pandemic levels of employment and energy efficiency, which is some states are just hitting that threshold. Other states have not hit the threshold yet. Connecticut's very close to hitting it. All others show growth over the pre-pandemic levels. Clean fuels is one that is fairly small in Connecticut, but also important. A lot of work around both alternative transportation and clean fuels in the innovation sector, where Connecticut is significantly punching above its weight, and as well as hybrid electric vehicles on the service side. Clean energy generation, which is one that comes up quite frequently, is really driven by solar. Yeah, Becca.
I'm sorry, I always have too many questions. On the efficiency side, I was just curious, do we know how many of these jobs are connected with CNL&M directly versus indirectly, or just simply not connected to those state funded programs at all?
Yeah, it's a good question. So as part of the national effort, we do have some questions that are related to utility connected programs. So not specifically about any funding streams, but like if it's part of if the work is driven by or directed by utilities, We don't have that run for Connecticut, but we could certainly look at that and get back to you with any insights that we might have. So basically, like if it's a contractor, we'll say, you know, maybe how much of your work is directed towards, you know, do you work with any on any utility funded or utility driven programs? And then, you know, we also have some awareness questions about those. So there's some things we could probably filter out, and I could send those to Rudy and Brian once we have a chance to look through them.
Oh, thank you. That'd be great.
Sure. No, it's a great question and it's an important one. So I'm glad that you raised it. On the next slide, we look at that energy efficiency a bit more. You know, we're sort of one area that is sort of interesting and you know, as we do this across a number of different states, you know, it's totally not surprising and consistent seeing primary driver of growth and the largest technology sector, also with HVAC being, you know, a significant component. A little bit surprising, you know, most other states are seeing that the HVAC and efficient HVAC and heat pumps are growing faster than some of the other segments and are above pre-pandemic levels. So it'll be an interesting thing for us to look at in the future, how heat pumps and efficient HVAC are being adopted or not being adopted. We often will, you know, have discussions or present the information and say, you know, this would be a good area to look at, you know, when there may have been updates to incentive programs or marketing campaigns or tax credits or any other things connected to efficient heating and cooling, because those tend to be driven pretty strongly by incentives and programs. So we often, when we see something like this, we say, you know, if anything's happening, you know, possibly a new program came out after the survey, or there hasn't been any updates in a while and we're seeing a little bit of a lag. So maybe an area of focus for the state, but something we could certainly, you know, talk about further, just sort of an interesting data point. When we look at generation, as I mentioned, solar is about 60% of the total electricity generation and the most growth. Wind is growing pretty quickly. I mean, it's anybody's guess right now. I mean, you all would know better than me about what's happening with wind. And I'm not sure, you know, I'm not sure anybody has tons of optimism in terms of the offshore space going forward. But we'll see what happens there. Traditional hydro and other hydropower is also an area that's really, I think, interesting in the state. And then I'll also be very interested to see about nuclear going forward, given the increased prominence nationally of nuclear as a net zero technology. It's certainly getting a lot of attention in Washington. On the next slide, we look at the value chain, which, you know, rather than looking at technologies, we look at the industry sectors that are contributing to the employment. And not surprisingly, construction is the largest component. One of the aspects of clean energy, as opposed to sort of some of the more traditional energy sources, is that the jobs and the activity are largely in the build out as opposed to the ongoing operations, right? So a solar farm takes a lot more people to build than it does to operate. And certainly fewer people than in the operations phase than in maybe a large scale power plant. But what we see here is the construction value chain really added a lot of jobs, more than 500 jobs in that year, and is 44% of the jobs. But what also is important, I think, in terms of the strength of the industry here, is that there is strength in manufacturing, particularly in precision manufacturing, as well as wholesale trade and logistics, and a very strong professional business services sector, which is where a lot of that innovation happens. So again, I said I focus a lot on that. The reason why I focus a lot on that is not only because so much of that is happening from the great universities that the state has, but also because those industries bring in a lot more outside funding and have an oversized impact on your state's gross domestic product. Okay, we've got a few more to get through. I know I'm sort of running out of time, but hopefully, because we've got a few questions and I have a few more minutes. Speaking of gross regional product, 2.4% of the total gross regional product in 2023, and those contributions increased by 3.1%. So this is a pretty important finding, and we're finding this regionally across the region. But I think one of the things that we're seeing here is that these increases are demonstrating not only sort of a maturing market, but also increases in areas like manufacturing and innovation, which tend to strengthen the gross regional product. So definitely an industry, you know, at more than 7 billion now in gross regional product, something that is worthy of the attention of policymakers. I've got a few more slides. Next, we look sort of at the county employment. Now, I think not surprisingly, the largest population centers have the most jobs, but we do find clean energy workers in every county in Connecticut. We are seeing faster growth around the Hartford area, faster than any other area. So that's, you know, as we look at some of these regional findings, I don't think there's anything terribly surprising in here, but we certainly are encouraged to see growth across every county. And then next, we also look at demographics. You know, I think some of the takeaways here is that the clean energy sector significantly overperforms the state's averages in terms of the number of veterans employed. It is, you know, 3 times more than the number of veterans in the workforce statewide. So I think that's a real strength. Obviously, you know, similar to basically every other state in the country, women are still significantly underrepresented in the clean energy sector, though largely in line with the industries that make up the sector. So this is, in other words, this is largely driven by the fact that construction makes up a significant portion of the clean energy sector, and women are still dramatically underrepresented in construction industries. And I see a hand from John.
Yes. I'm just wondering if there are some states that have a significantly better mix and diversity, and if there are things that they're doing that we ought to be considering.
So what I would say here is that Connecticut, these demographic slides in terms of diversity and sort of distribution of the workforce, you know, when as it comes to ethnic and racial minorities and mixed race workers, that difference of 21 and 22% is within the margin of error. So I would say that it is consistent with the workforce in the state, which is sort of what a reasonable benchmark is, right? So like you want to be a representative of the people who live and work in your state. In terms of women, there really are not significant. I can't think of any state that is necessarily sort of cracked that code. However, I will note that utilities play an important role, and the more involved the utilities are in the employment of clean energy workers, the more women are there, and that is a correlation. So I don't have any evidence to explain the causation behind it, but utilities tend to be more diverse than other sectors of the clean energy economy in both gender and race and ethnicity. So the other thing that is interesting that I will tell you is that there are a number of states, many states, that are not as diverse on the racial and ethnic aspect of that. And the correlation that we see there is also unionization rates. So despite lots of improvement that can be made from a diversity standpoint within labor unions, labor union employment is more diverse in this sector than non-union employment, especially in the construction trades. One other thing to note is that the fact that this is a younger workforce than Connecticut's overall workforce is a very positive sign for retirements and workforce challenges. So I just sort of lay that out there. There are a lot of questions around diversity programs and other programs that have existed, and there really is not anything that sort of jumps out as a terribly positive example across the board on that area around women. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't really excellent case studies of individual programs that are doing a good job getting more women into the workforce, clean energy workforce. It's just from a statewide perspective, I can't really point to any state that has sort of figured that out and significantly changed that number.
Well, that's infuriating, but thank you.
Yeah. So there are some interesting questions there, and there are some sort of there are a couple of positives that I could sort of present, particularly around women in the workforce. So the women who work in clean energy tend to earn more than the men do, and that's largely based on role. So women are more frequently in professional roles that pay a higher wage, and the diversity of women, or the makeup of higher wage workers in clean energy is a much closer to 50-50 breakdown between men and women. The unfortunate part of that statistic is that as those wages go up, the racial and ethnic diversity decreases. So it becomes significantly whiter, but more gender mixed. So I think there's lots of work on the diversity aspect to increase participation of women, and also to make sure that there are good pathways for everybody to succeed. I have 2 more slides, I think, to get through, and then I'm sorry, Brian, if I've gone way over your agenda time, but hopefully this has been helpful. We do also look at traditional energy employment. So what is that? It's basically everything that doesn't count as a clean energy under your definition of clean energy, but is still connected to the energy sector. So this would include fossil electric power generation, fossil fuels delivery and processing and storage, traditional transmission, distribution and storage, and gasoline and diesel powered vehicles. I will note that some states, like the state of Maine as an example, includes all transmission, distribution, and storage jobs in their definition of clean energy, because they believe that transmission, distribution, and storage upgrades are necessary for the transmission of all clean energy. And so that, that's certainly, when you look at those numbers, there's quite a lot of traditional transmission, distribution, and storage in there that includes, your gas network. It includes your traditional wires, and storage, which would include things like LNG, CNG, as well as oil and delivered fuels. And then finally, I think my last slide, if I'm tracking correctly, is that we look across the EPG sector, and what we see is, obviously largely this is natural gas, and we have seen growth in natural gas over the period since we've been tracking. And there are still small amounts of employment in some other areas. Some of this can be around decommissioning. It could also be professional services or consulting. So it doesn't just mean people at a power plant. It can also mean people who are consulting, providing financing, legal services, manufacturing, etc. So these are the other areas as well. And then we have our team on the next slide, and our email if anybody wants to scribble it down, or just reach out to Brian and Rudy for us. We are always happy to answer questions. We'll probably want those folks included in that, so please copy them as well, so everybody's on the same page, but always open to answer any questions. And we will work on the one question that came up and see what we can find out and share back with the Green Bank team.
Thank you so much. I have a question on 5 years into doing this report. How can we use it, or do you have examples of how other states may have used this report, or foundations, as a way to promote the findings and hopefully increase those numbers in terms of, Black and Indigenous and people of color in the industry and women?
Okay, there are lots of ways that the report can be used and have been used in other states, both as a standalone and with other research that's being done. So I mentioned, you're likely going to have a comprehensive workforce needs assessment or modeling assessment around energy transition. Well, hopefully, I should say, that will continue. That work will continue. That the funding that Connecticut was promised to do that work. And one key aspect of this is that you're tracking your progress over time, right? So basically, what those reports do is they say, you're going to need 20,000 HVAC contractors by 2040 and able to keep in order to keep up with demand. Mm-hmm. And right now, you've got 4,000. So it gives you a roadmap to say, okay, are we able to attract and recruit those folks? If not, what's going on? And then when you look across, say, that sector, if you see that it is not representative of your workforce, or perhaps more importantly, not representative of your ready and able to work folks who are currently unemployed, underemployed, or need of a better job, then it allows you to say, all right, we can target certain communities where we know there's lots of growth, so like Hartford County is growing quickly. And we know that, young men between these ages or this demographic profile are not represented in the sector, but maybe there's lots of opportunity for there. How can we target those organizations for workforce development and supportive services to get them aware of and into these careers? So really thinking about the workforce side. Another way to look at it is to say, what's our economic development strategy here, right? So yes, obviously people are thinking about rates and thinking about, consumer costs. And then there's also a group of people thinking about how do we create more jobs and economic development? Well, where are the areas where you're going to get the most bang for your buck on building out the supply chain and professional services and construction, where you can, really increase the overall economic activity in the state of Connecticut by supporting targeted industry sectors and technologies. So that's another where's your strength. And then there's also detail in the report that looks at sort of what is the sentiment of various employers across the state. And so if we see that there are big challenges, so as an example, in Massachusetts, we see that non-union employers are having very high level of difficulty finding workers. Union employers are not having difficulty finding workers at all. In fact, they put out 100 openings and they're getting 500 applications. So it allows you to sort of dig in and say, what is it? Is it the size of the bench? Is it what people are being paid? Is it geographic location? And have a bit better of a diagnosis of what can be done. So, and honestly, like this is the part of the work that gets us most excited. So if you all are ever sort of brainstorming about things you want to do and there's utility and having us come in and talk about how some of the numbers might support that, we love working with the Green Bank team. It's a fun project for us and this gets us excited. So always happy to provide some additional insights where useful.
That's excellent. Thank you so much, Philip. Are there any other questions?
Just a big thank you again, Chair Watson, to Philip and the team for all of this. We're 5 years in. The data that's been provided here will be put into a different format. We'll work to then set up a webinar to share the findings. But obviously, to your point, Brenda, we want to go deeper and further with all the findings here. This is 2023 data. We had 2024, which I think is going to be a bigger year too. But 2025, Philip, who knows, right? I mean, so we could see a lot of different changes. But a big kudos to Rudy on the Green Bank team for really shepherding us. The utility partners. We're grateful, Rudy, to you keeping us moving forward on all of this. But John, it looks like there's a question from John.
Yeah. Well, actually, the question was for you, Brian, and a kind of a question and suggestion. It just seems as though this report, it might be good to get to, like, say, the leaders of the state Senate and the and the House, and to make sure that the governor's office has a copy of it as well, and the leaders of the environmental and the energy and technology committees, because I think, among other things, it reflects well on the Green Bank and the progress that we've been able to help engender, and it gives people the message that this is not these are just not one-off things that clean energy jobs begin to represent a significant part of the workforce. So anyways, that's just sharing those thoughts.
Great,
Yeah,
great.
that's kind of where I was thinking, John, policy, but also on the ground with churches and getting our churches to understand that there are huge gaps to fill. Yeah, I have tons of ideas on how we can work together in promoting this report. It's a wonderful report, and I thank everyone who is involved, and especially Rudy. Rudy is one of our unsung heroes at the Green Bank.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And then James was listening to your comments there, so I'm sure when we get into the legislative update, James will have a perspective as well, John, on that. But great, yeah, all duly noted.
Thank you.
All right.
Okay, so we are going to move on to our next agenda item. And I believe we're going to turn it over to either Brian or Becca.
Yeah, I love it. I'm happy to jump in. I will, at the end, toss it to Brian to talk about some other federal funding opportunities for updates. But I will start with a couple that are flowing directly through DEEP. First up, apologies, I don't have slides, it'll all be verbal, so please just raise your hand or jump in if you have questions. First up, I wanted to talk about the HER and HERE rebates, which is under the Inflation Reduction Act. HER is the Home Efficiency Rebates Program, and HERE is the Home Electrification and Appliance Rebates Program. Together, these two programs equate to about $100 million that we have been obligated from the Federal Department of Energy. Again, those dollars are obligated to DEEP at this point. DEEP is working on drafting implementation blueprints, which are plans that have to be submitted for both programs to DOE before we can actually launch the programs themselves. But that said, again, the funds are obligated to us under contract with the Federal Department of Energy. We're planning to submit those blueprints specifically for the HERE program in early to mid 2025. So we're actively working on that. And the goal is to launch HERE in mid 2025, so later this year, and then HER to launch early 2026. In addition to that, I just wanted to flag that we are working really closely with the utilities to implement these programs. We want to leverage, of course, those conservation load management programs that deliver energy efficiency services every year to thousands of homes. And so we are actively working to sign contracts with the utilities to help deliver, again, the majority of these funds. So any questions on HER and HERE before I move on to an update on the New England Heat Pump Accelerator? Yeah, John.
This is John. Has there been any interruption in getting, you talked about all these different programs as if everything is going normally. Is everything going normally or what?
Yeah, no, great question. I will say at this point we have again a contract with the federal government, and we are working to meet the obligations of that contract. There have been cases in a variety of different programs where funds were, frozen, unfrozen, in terms of availability. And maybe I should just help to level set everybody's expectation. Normally, maybe not normally, but in the majority of cases where we receive federal funding, the state does get an agreement or a contract with the federal government that says, yes, you now have access to these funds. But those funds actually don't sit at the state. What that means is that the state then has access to a drawdown system that allows us to get reimbursements for things that we've fronted. Most of these contracts are reimbursement contracts. And so that's the process that normally happens. Again, there have been some situations where particular accounts have been frozen and unfrozen across a variety of federal funding streams. But again, at this point, we still have contracts with the feds that dictate that we have these funds, we have access to these funds, and we currently do have access to these funds. So we're actively working to get HER and HERE launched as quickly as we can. And you'll hear me sort of say that about the rest of these programs as well. That doesn't mean that, of course, things can't go awry. And I'll also flag that I think folks probably have seen Connecticut is part of a litigation process with the federal government about ensuring access to these contractually obligated dollars.
Question from Bert.
Thanks, Becca, but not only are they contractually provided, but they are statutorily provided. And it was noted this week by Judge Chutkin in the Climate United case that is working its way through the district court, where she provided a temporary restraining order. That these funds are statutorily provided, so that EPA in freezing funds not only or trying to terminate contracts not only have to be aware of its own regulations and guidelines, but also the statutorily enacted greenhouse gas reduction fund provisions. And, by extension, that goes to things like, under the IRA for these rebates that you're talking about. In my view, these provisions are well protected at this point, and they could get delayed, but I think it's a matter of working our way through the court system if someone tries to deny deeply access to the funds at the federal level.
Yeah, thanks, Bert. Context is helpful for everybody, I'm sure. All right, so that was the update on her and here. Next up, I just wanted to give a quick update on the New England Heat Pump Accelerator. This federal funding is actually under the Climate Pollution Reduction Grant implementation grants bucket. So you might hear people refer to it as one of the CPRG implementation grants. This grant is a regional grant. Again, most of New England applied. Connecticut was the prime, with Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Maine, and New Hampshire. And we did get allocated $450 million to support heat pump deployment across New England. Again, we have our contractually obligated agreement with the federal EPA. And we actually just recently issued a request for proposals for a regional implementer to help with getting this program up and going. We held a bidders conference on March 10th, and proposals are due April 4th. So please do share that widely if you know of folks that might be interested in helping us to deploy this program. High level, again, that $450 million, most of it will be spent on providing midstream incentives for heat pump technologies in residential homes. And then there will be a smaller portion of funds dedicated to innovative pilots that will help to deploy, again, heat pumps in sort of hard to reach segments, also specifically low income and disadvantaged communities. And another portion of funding will be dedicated to sort of data tracking across the region and education and outreach resources to help people better understand this technology. All right, and with that, I'll open it up for questions on the heat pump accelerator.
Yeah, I've got one, Becca. Is that when you talk about an implementer, are you talking about one implementer, or would you potentially pick more than one?
So we framed the RFP such that a team can apply, but if a team applied, that there would still need to be one prime that sort of contracted with Connecticut, so that we were really making one contract and it could have multiple subs if necessary.
Thanks.
Yeah, of course. Richard.
Becca, on this and the other one, I know that these are obligated and we're due to see the funds coming. Have you actually seen any monies come from the federal government for these, and sort of tracking this around different programs? And it seems like things have loosened up, but I don't know that I've heard of actually money flowing from the feds to the states. Has that happened for either IRA or this one?
Yeah, so I do know that the state is able to or put forward drawdowns from these. I don't actually know all the details of how that process works and whether we've officially received the funds, but I do believe drawdowns have been made on both of those. So that's all I can tell you.
Okay, well, that's good news.
Right. Next up, I just wanted to give a quick update on Solar for All as well. Brian might be able to add to this as well. So on this one again, funds were obligated from the EPA to DEEP in July of 2024. EPA approved DEEP's work plan in January of this year. DEEP issued a request for written comments with responses due on March 13th and received, I believe, about 7 responses. DEEP will use those written comments to inform the implementation of technical assistance items, such as assistance for communities and community education and engagement. And DEEP anticipates financial assistance for multifamily affordable housing properties interested in installing solar will be available by the end of June 2025, and financial assistance for single-family homes will be available later this summer. And again, this chunk of money is dedicated to supporting solar across the state. And that was my last chunk of federal funding updates. With otherwise, I'll hand it to Brian to talk about some other federal funding that we're also managing. There's a lot happening still.
The joy. No. So let me cover. Thank you, Becca, for all that. Let me cover a few other areas of the Inflation Reduction Act. Let me start with tax credits, and then I'll get into 2 other programs underneath the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. So I was being a little cheeky earlier to fill up on 2023 versus 2024 data, because the data that we just got presented was 2023, and a lot of the IRS-backed tax credits really happened in 2024, where you saw lots of adders, right? There were energy communities adders, an additional 10%. You had domestic content adders, 10% on top of that. You had low-income communities, 10 to 20% on top of that. So I think in 2024, we're going to see probably even more growth. And that's just in the Section 48 renewable energy stuff. There's efficiency tax credits, there's vehicle tax credits, there's just a lot of different tax credits underneath the Inflation Reduction Act. So obviously, with what's happening with President Trump and the budgets, I think the market, just in my conversations with the market, is definitely concerned about the trajectory of tax credits, including adders. We all can anticipate, as Congress looks at budget reconciliation and sometime in September, how they treat the federal budget and dealing with taxes and tax credits. All of that will shake out then. There was an effort recently of Republican congressmen showing support for various tax credits underneath the IRA because their districts are benefiting from investments that are coming through those IRA tax credits. So something to definitely follow. On the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund side, so yeah, Becca talked about one of the 3 pillars of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which was Solar for All, and our DEEP-led Project Sunbridge project. There are 2 other legs to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund that is $20 billion. $6 billion of that is through the Clean Communities Investment Accelerator, which is intended to get community lenders like credit unions, community development financial institutions, minority depository institutions to begin to lend and to provide capital to low-income and disadvantaged communities and businesses by providing them with essentially grants that build their balance sheets, up to $10 million of grants so that they can provide loans within this community, and then some technical assistance on top of that. I'll talk about where these funds are being held up, but just anecdotally, there are community-based financial institutions in Connecticut that are in the pipelines to some of the respective winners to bring some of that funding into Connecticut, which is great because we want an ecosystem of local lenders like we have with our Smarty loan, where local community banks and credit unions feel invited to come in and to provide access to capital to underserved markets. So that's the intent of the CCIA. The other $14 billion is through the National Clean Investment Fund. Obviously, this is a daily basis sort of activity that's going on. Not only are these funds obligated, but they're actually dispersed. So they are beyond obligation. They're actually in bank accounts. The Connecticut Green Bank, in fact, has a bank account in the amount of $93.5 million that is at Citibank. Our portion of a $5 billion award that was made to the Coalition for Green Capital. So our 93.5 million separates into about 41 million for Connecticut, about 15 million for New Hampshire, and 38 million for Puerto Rico. So we're serving as an umbrella to other states and territories to build their green banks. And then, of course, within our Connecticut allocation are a number of different strategies that we're pursuing, including green school buses, green schools, green homes, and a whole gamut of things to bring low-income and disadvantaged communities into this market. But I would just say broadly, we had access to those funds in January. We were drawing from those funds from Citibank. February 14th was our last draw, but they were frozen. Funds were frozen by the EPA on February 13th. For those of you who are following it, you would have seen an EPA notice to Citibank to stop making allowing any sorts of draws from any awardees or sub-awardees. Then on, literally things are happening daily, but on March 11th, the EPA issued a notice to terminate all contracts for the NCIF awardees, the 3 awardees, of which the Coalition for Green Capital is one. And then the CCIA has 5 awardees, so there are 8 awardees in total. Administrator Zeldin essentially said, we're going to give you a notice of termination of those contracts. So a number of the awardees are in court. And just yesterday, Judge Chutkin from the DC District Court essentially ruled saying that the EPA's termination was unlawful. So there's to Bert's point, a temporary restraining order that's been put on. The judge has requested additional cases to be presented before those accounts can be reopened, if they can be reopened. But the EPA unlawfully terminated those contracts based on all the things that they said were going on and didn't have proof of. So it is a really exciting time, something that we hadn't anticipated, but our team here in Connecticut is still steadfast, focused on implementing the public policies of our legislature and our governor. So we're committed to moving these items forward. So yeah, that's an update on the GGRF, NCIF, and tax credits. See if there are any questions. All right. Anything else, gang, under federal funding? All right. Well, Brenda has left. So if folks are cool with it, I'll just continue to work us through and chair us through the meeting. Let's see. I think the next item is an update from the Connecticut Green Bank. Let me just get this teed up here. Okay. Yeah. So we've got an update on our FY25 comprehensive plan, and then some thoughts looking ahead at FY26. So in general, as we've talked about in the past, we have 3 programmatic areas. The first one is an incentives program, a division that really supports Public Act 2153, which is to support the achievement of 1,000 megawatts of energy storage by 2030 target. Within that bill is the ability for PURA to determine administrators or co-administrators of an energy storage program, of which the utilities, Eversource and Avangrid, are co-administrators with the Green Bank of a 580 megawatt behind the meter residential and non-residential energy storage solutions program. So this year, the Green Bank has a target of a little over 500 projects. I'll get to your question in a sec, Bernie. I see you there. A little over 500 projects for over 14 megawatts of installed capacity. Some of the challenges that we're experiencing with the program obviously are the value proposition to residential customers of, pursuing battery storage. These are expensive systems. Knock on wood, we haven't had to or haven't experienced grid outages since probably Tropical Storm Isaias for those durations. So it's been a challenge for customers to realize the value on top of a solar PV system of battery storage. So we're trying to wrestle with that and figure that out. And Solar for All is one mechanism for that. The dispatch of those batteries is challenging. The summer, the winter dispatch, the passive and active dispatch, getting the data in terms of the DERMS so that we could understand on a real-time basis how batteries are being dispatched as opposed to having to wait months to receive data. So that's been a challenge. But the biggest one, I think, is interconnection. We have some 100+ megawatts of non-residential battery storage systems that have been approved for incentives, but they are in the interconnection queues, and some of them can be in those queues for years. And we see attrition as a result of those long time periods in the interconnection queue. So that's a big area, big challenge to work through. Let me stop here. I'll take a question from Bernie, and then I'll continue on financing programs. Go ahead.
Hey, Brian, thank you very much. First, let me say, I'm glad that you and the Green Bank are on our side. I can see that it's a little bit like a Star Wars. I think you're fighting the Empire here. But sort of with all the contingencies and all the back and forth on the federal funding, if I undertake a project, whether it be commercial or residential, that depends on some sort of rebate or tax credit from the feds, is there a manner in which the Green Bank sort of backstops that? So in other words, if I get down, get completed and owe the contractor the money, and then somehow or another Zeldin et al. Take the money away, can the Green Bank help me out, offer some sort of assurance, or is that level of uncertainty going to permeate the market?
I mean, we have programs, Bernie, right? So let's take our solar marketplace assistance program where we provide technical assistance to financial assistance. So in those, projects where we're working on multifamily affordable housing, where we expect the 30% investment tax credit, where there might be a benefit of the low income or the energy communities tax credit, what we typically do in that circumstance is say, we price to what we expect, knock on wood, the 30% investment tax credit. But in the event that the project is eligible for those additional credits, then we come back to the property owner and or the tenants with additional benefits later when those federal resources come to us. So they're all program dependent, meaning outside of programs, the rest of the market, like we aren't playing that role of facilitating to the ITC. That's a very much a market risk that the market is going to have to wrestle with. Yeah. Okay.
That's the way it is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right. So financing programs. Okay. Yeah. So we were just kind of hinting at that. So we've got, about 2,000 projects, nearly 10 megawatts of targets for our various financing programs, including supporting commercial property assessed clean energy, our solar marketplace assistance program, our small business energy advantage, a collaboration with Eversource, in our Smarty loan. So we've got big targets there. And then, of course, lastly, under environmental infrastructure, our team just recently released a waste and recycling primer, which was our last primer, which is really a market assessment of our environmental infrastructure definition. So we've completed primers for agriculture, land conservation, water, parks and recreation, environmental markets, and waste and recycling was our last primer. So we just released that, and we really looked at three things. One was we looked at how we think about the reuse and recycling of solar and battery storage. Obviously, we're creating a lot of good that is creating air pollution reductions as a result of deploying carbon-free renewable energy systems. But at some point in time, those systems are going to have to be taken back and disposed of or recycled in some manner. So we're looking at that. We're creating a good today, but it could be a problem tomorrow. I think as an example, the residential solar investment program supported the deployment of about 380 megawatts of solar. I think that's something like 40 Olympic-sized swimming pools worth of panels when they all come back. So it's a lot of things that we have to be thinking about. So that's one thing we're thinking about. The second one is organic waste, which I believe is our second highest component of our waste stream. We have been focused on food waste. For those of you who might recall, we've invested in quantum biopower out of Southington, Connecticut. That's been a great success, taking food waste, turning it into anaerobic digester gas, running that through an engine, and producing class 1 renewable energy resources that I think are VNM'd and support lower energy costs for a few towns. And then, of course, we've got our farm waste to energy project at Fort Hill Farms, a similar thing, but using cow waste in an anaerobic digester into an engine. So we have some familiarity with organic waste. Our team is thinking through with the DEEP team how we can unlock more investment in the management of organics. And then lastly, as DEEP works through its materials management study and needs assistance raising capital, we have the ability to support that activity. So those are kind of the 3 pillars underneath our waste and recycling primer. So that's an update in terms of where we're at. In terms of looking ahead, so this legislative session, James may speak to this, our focus is really supporting the governor's bill, which was SB 1245, but it is now SB 9. That is to support resilience in Connecticut, specifically 2 parts of the bill. The bill has a number of sections. There's probably 35 sections to the bill. The first 10 sections have to do with disclosures to homeowners and renters that, in fact, if you have homeowners insurance doesn't cover flood risk. So if you think that you're covered by your insurance carrier and you don't have flood risk, you're not covered. So the first really almost 10 parts of that bill are information and disclosure. Super important, super basic, but one would think everyone would get and understand that. Then there's a whole probably 10 more sections around planning, the planning of conservation and development, inclusion of resilience, hazard mitigation plans, all those sorts of things being inclusive of a changing climate and the need for more resilience and adaptation to those changes. And then the tail end of the bill has to do with transferring development rights as well as resilience improvement districts. We are very supportive of both of those sections, including resilience improvement districts, where you could imagine, a whole neighborhood or a city or community having, 10 to 20 different resilience projects, from a park that serves as a stormwater runoff area to a high reliable clean energy providing backup power to a hospital to, you name it, where we can work within the democratic principles of that neighborhood or that territory to effectively enable benefit assessments like we have for CPACE to be put on all of the properties in that resilience improvement district that would provide the funding mechanism for those projects. So when the governor announced that policy in January 21st of this year, there was an article in the Bond Buyers that essentially said, watch Connecticut, because if this policy passes, then we're talking about trillions of dollars in resilience investment across the country when you're looking at these things in this manner. And of course, we are the insurance capital of the country, so we should be leading on these sorts of things. And any consumers that are within those resilience improvement districts should be receiving insurance savings as a result of making those investments to increase their resilience. So we want the insurance industry to be a partner with us in terms of enabling that investment. So that's a super important one for us this session. Of course, Smarty and CPACE, our products, now allow for resilience financing. On investing in affordable housing, this is also a super priority. This is Section 2 of Public Act 2148, partnering with DEEP, PURA, Department of Housing, CHAFA, to make sure that the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program can work for tenants residing in affordable housing. We've got our Solar MAP program. We've got our Solar for All, our Project Sunbridge program. We're really all in on trying to open up this market for affordable housing. And then lastly is electric school buses. Underneath Public Act 2225, there was a section in there that established 100% zero emission school bus and environmental justice community communities by 2030 and all communities by 2040. So we are right there with DEEP, helping to bring private investment in so that we can scale up the investment in the infrastructure and the deployment of school buses. So we've got a team that is working on that program as well with the DEEP team. So those are like outside of the other stuff that's pretty typical of what we do. These are like the new areas that we're working to build out and opening up new markets for so that we can draw in more private investment. Let me stop there and see if there are any questions before we go to our CLNM partners. Let's see, I see a question from John. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Brian, on the affordable housing, are there statutory regulations that require that these be energy efficient or use renewables or have certain requirements that would promote energy savings?
Yeah, so we're going to hear from our teams in a second about how we're working with our utility partners to create a whole of, an affordable housing property that does everything: solar, storage, efficiency, health and safety, all those sorts of things. There's nothing in the statute that requires those things. Underneath Section 2 of Public Act 2148, essentially allowed the Residential Renewable Energy Solutions Program, which you will recall it was the kind of the RCIP, it's the successor to the RCIP. That policy initially was for single family homeowners. And we were like in 2021 working with Senator Lopes and the DEEP team, like we need to expand this market to enable affordable housing tenants to benefit from this because they are families too. And now through a PURA overseen regulatory process, how that program works, which the utilities now carry forward from the incentive perspective, has all been laid out. I think there are some 12 to 1,300 properties that have been designated affordable housing, nearly 90,000 units. So we're going after those properties with clean energy, including rooftop, parking canopy, ground mounted units, whatever we could do to maximize deployment on those units, but nothing statutorily mandating, John. But I could say Mackie will present in a bit. The opportunity is big. I think our partners at Department of Housing and Connecticut Housing Finance Authority have built into their programs sustainability important mechanisms, resilience mechanisms. So at least from the state side, there are commitments to pursue efficiency, renewable energy, resilience, but nothing statutorily that mandates it.
Right. Thank you, Brian.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's keep going. All right, so we've got the update on the 2025 CLNM. I think, Steve, I'll turn it to you. That works?
Sure. Thanks, Brian. And we covered some of this in the last joint committee, but because we resubmit our plan in March, we wanted to just kind of refreshen up what's the latest information and then what things may have changed. So this kind of summarizes the overall budget and savings and benefits. So the first three columns, electric, natural, gas, and total, those cover the budgets for the 3 years, 25, 26, 27. So overall, about a $720 million investment over the next 3 years. The columns in the light blue cover the benefits from electricity savings, peak demand savings, gas savings, oil, propane, and converting those to MMBTUs, and then the greenhouse gas emissions. And then the columns over to the right, the lifetime savings, the dollar benefit that uses the Synapse Avoided Energy Supply Cost Study and kind of equates the energy savings that we're getting plus also other benefits. And we get a $2.8 billion benefit. So that gives us roughly, for every dollar invest, we get $3.90 in lifetime benefits. So great numbers still. And then from the MMBTU lifetime in greenhouse gas emissions numbers, those are 44.5 million MMBTUs. And then from a lifetime greenhouse gas emissions over $3 million. So great numbers. A little bit increase since last time because we had some carryover from some of the companies basically spending that rolls into next year. Plus, more importantly, we had extra revenues we from usage from customers that gets applied to the energy efficiency funds for more dollars to invest in 2025 to 2027. Next slide. These are just high level, some changes we made, some little kind of, I would say almost to a certain extent, some just little edits from the November 1st filing. We had to clarify our residential online marketplace for heat pump water heaters. If budgets become available, we'll add that back in. And a note that we're going to offer air to water and small ducted high velocity heat pump incentives. And then on the C&I side, just more detail on our tailored market solutions for the controlled environment, agriculture, and nonprofits. And then we kind of clarify how we're phasing out the non-controlled lighting. And then we also talk about consistency between the Eversource and on-grid energy utilization assessments, basically how we work the study costs, just kind of some clarification in the text. Next slide. And from the education outreach portfolio, something significant, the board approved the companies to have 2 energized CT in action exhibits. One is geared towards the students and one's geared towards the committee. So that process has kicked off in terms of development. We did the RFP and the board approved that. So that's moving forward. And then we also are adding another K through 12 student contest goals as well. And then we, for like compliance purposes, we update the PMI with the latest how 2024 closed out. So we have increases in our expectations for performance management incentives. We update the budgets and savings. And then we also made some clarifications on the evaluation section with new studies and basically kind of clean up the document from what the 2024 year end up actually results in. And then the next slide is just a kind of a refresher that now that our plan is filed, and I think you guys are in good shape, Brian, that we need to work jointly together on this new initiative, which is by October 1st, 2025, to offer residential and C&I customers a coordinated initiative for solar, photovoltaic, electric vehicle charging, and battery storage in combination, and also provide some financing options to customers. So this is a joint effort between the companies and then the Green Bank. So we'll need to kick off that probably. Hopefully we can get some time in April to kind of kick that off, Brian. But we're identifying resources on the utility side, and then we'll coordinate with you on who your resources are, and then we'll work on this, and we'll include the DB technical consultants as well in the process.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Any question, comments? All right. Let's keep going. Great. Okay, so we are at agenda item 7, opportunities and challenges, healthy housing. And let's see, I see you there, Mackie. Why don't we turn it to Mackie Dykes?
Great. Thanks, Brian. Yes, I actually, it's the same slide I presented on last time. We have made progress, but still haven't, so what's here is 4 projects from our first portfolio of affordable housing solar through our solar map program, which Brian referenced earlier. So through this program, we offer technical and financial assistance from the beginning of a project, from feasibility assessments to financing the project to construction oversight and turning the project on eventually. For master metered properties, there is a requirement in the RES program to generally RES requires for multifamily properties at least 20% of the benefits of the project to be shared with tenants. For master metered properties, that benefit to tenants is realized through an improvement in the property. So we are through Solar Map and our financing products provided funding for those, but for the most part are energy efficiency improvements in these properties. Although we do have one that's doing security enhancements, which is a eligible improvement under RES. So as I reported on last time, we were trying to the process of contracting with these properties. We've since conducted an RFP for the solar component of the project, which will determine how much funding is available for the energy efficiency improvement. So we're finalizing those selections now from that RFP, and then we'll proceed with implementing both the solar and the tenant improvements. We also have another portfolio of projects behind this one, which is slightly larger. And hopefully the next time we meet, we'll have that a little more fleshed out and can add to the list of properties where we'll be funding both solar and efficiency in affordable housing.
Great. Thank you, Mac. Questions, comments? All right, let's keep going. Let me see, James DeSantis, you there? And so, James, if you want to do an update, great. Any others who want to add to the update, please do. But James, let me turn it to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Brian. Brian, can you forward to the slide? There it is. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. James DeSantis. I'm the legislative liaison for the Green Bank. I just have a brief slide here. Just to walk through very quickly. So on very high level, so the session convened on January 8th. It adjourns on June 4th at midnight. So we're about a third way through the session. What has been really driving the discussion up at the Capitol, especially within the Energy and Technology and the Environment Committees, which both have cognizance of what we're talking about today, is really the high electric rates. So you've been reading about this issue in the press since last summer. It's mainly attributed to Millstone and the moratorium due to the COVID. But what has really happened is since they did the bill redesign a few years ago, it has really put a spotlight on the public benefit charge. So that has been the main topic of discussion thus far in the Energy and Technology Committee. So you're seeing two competing bills that have come to the forefront. One was Senate Bill 647. It was a Republican-backed bill. It's supported by both caucuses in the House and Senate. And then you have the Senate Bill 4, which is the Senate Democrat bill. So you're looking at a battle right now that's occurring within the committee and will get much larger as the session progresses, dealing with politics over policy on this issue. The other one is Public Act 2431. This was a bill that passed last year, which has PURA to study renewable energy tariffs and make suggestions for any potential successor programs by January of 2026. So now PURA just released a notice of proceeding that the docket is going to be opened. It is docket 250214. The Green Bank will be filing a motion to be a participant in that docket. So just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. The reason why I'm only addressing one bill on this slide is that we are a third way through the legislative session. I can say with absolute certainty that every single piece of legislation over there is a work in progress at this point. But where we are in terms of process here is we have completed phase one. Phase one is the bill introduction. That is the bill screening that we do here that all agencies do. We've calculated about roughly 2,000 pieces of legislation this session have been introduced either as proposed bills or committee bills. We're currently in the public hearing process right now. The committee process is wrapping up. Energy and Technology just had their last meeting yesterday. Environment comes at the end of the month, and then you'll see GAE, Public Health, Judish sometime mid-April, and then the budget committees, Finance and Appropriations at the end of April will conclude their work. And then the committees will open up for legislation referral only. So the one bill I wanted to really highlight for everyone here is Senate Bill 647, which I referenced earlier on in the discussion. It is a Republican caucus bill. It was introduced in the Energy and Technology Committee. It did have a public hearing on March 6th, the same day as Senate Bill 4. I would encourage everyone to watch that public hearing, especially the first, I hate to say it, 2.5, 3 hours of that, where Commissioner Dykes from Deep was up there and did an absolutely amazing job of discussing every aspect of this bill. But on the very high level, I only pulled out two areas to discuss here. But so sections 1 to 3 moves all the programs from the electric bills from the ratepayers to the state budget. It is touted as being more transparent and can be adjusted on a more regular and frequent basis. Problem with that is you are subjecting that public benefit charge, which funds everything from the conservation load management to the energy storage system to EVs to everything that Brian Garcia spoke about earlier. You're subjecting that to compete against other programs that are currently funded from the budget. More importantly, you are subjecting that those line items to specific line item vetoes from the governor. So policies that have been created over the past 25 years that have passed the majority of the House, Senate, signed by the governor, went through the pure regulatory process, can be eliminated by a swipe of a gubernatorial pen. Very dangerous precedent to do. Section 4 would have eliminated the Clean Energy Fund, which is the main funding source for the Connecticut Green Bank. Speaking to the report that came out earlier about the clean energy jobs report, that would look a lot different if this bill would have passed. It would have absolutely devastated the jobs. And not only that, but you have the other aspects of that too, right? So you have downsizing of businesses. You have reduction in corporate taxes, income taxes. It truly is a devastating effect. And it would also hinder the deployment into environmental justice communities, negating health and economic development. And I know John Harity asked a question earlier of whether or not the job report should be presented to the governor and to the chairs of the Energy and Environmental Committee. And I think that's a very good idea. I think it should be bolstered with the revenue data that's paid in taxes to the state, as well as other pieces of data, and then that should be distributed into the entire General Assembly, in my opinion. But that's all I have for today. I'm sure the next EEB board meeting we'll be able to flush out a lot more pieces of legislation and concepts to discuss.
Thank you, James. Thank you for that. Questions, comments, others, comments? All right, let's keep going. All right, we're coming down the wire here, gang. So we've got just a few updates from our teams, our utility teams, our Green Bank teams. Let's start with the CNI government update and the small and medium large business update. I think those are all covered in this one, gang, right? So I'll let you all take over here. Steve or Mackie?
Mac, you can do it if you want, and I'll add in if you like.
Sure. So, I think I'm trying to think, at least 6 years, maybe 7 years now, Green Bank and Eversource have had a partnership together with Amalgamated Bank to provide capital to what began as the Small Business Energy Advantage program, where Eversource provides on-bill 0%, originally 4-year financing for energy efficiency projects. We've gone through 2 3-year periods of that partnership, with the last one expiring at the end of last year. We just executed, I think yesterday, another 3-year agreement to continue that partnership that enshrines the expansions from the original agreement that we've slowly made over time, which is to increase capital availability to customers and extend the terms available to some up to 7 years. So, I think we look forward to another 3 years of partnership under this great program. I guess Steve, you might want to talk through I think you'd be better suited than I, the sort of expansion to Business Energy Advantage and the municipal loans.
Yeah, sounds good. Thanks, Megan. I'm just going to give you some quick stats. Gintiana sent some numbers to me before the meeting, but since the original purchase that Mackie described, back in 2000, right before 2018. We've sold to the combination of Green Bank and Amalgamated $116 million in loans. That was 7,800 loans, and then customers have repaid 90 million of that, so about 25 million left to repay. So it's been great. We've had different definitions of small business. At one point, small business was up to 1 million kWh. Then we kind of separated micro businesses, and then business energy advantage, 1 million kWh annual usage to 3 million. So essentially, they're all kind of combined underneath the overall umbrella of small business. Small business now on our plan that we filed basically goes up to 3 million kWh, so it covers business energy advantage and small business. And all along, we provided municipal customers with the same loan program, the 0% financing, as Mackie described, as well. So exciting this again. And like I said, we were happy with the results. This is one of the kind of programs we worked on jointly that we're really proud of.
Excellent. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mackie. Questions, comments? All right, we're getting close to wrapping up here. I think we've got the last residential, single, and multifamily. Let me take a stab at the macro level on single family, then I'll turn it to Mac on multifamily. Yeah, just the Smarty, we continue to provide access to loan capital for single family households through the Smart E-Loan. Including for some of those other measures I was mentioning, resilience, water. So we've expanded it to be able to support those activities and are working with the insurance industry now on other resilience types of measures like fortified roofs and unique things that are important to the insurance sector. So the Smarty loan with our local community banks and credit unions, and then our continued investment in Posigen, which not only does the solar and efficiency financing, but also is now has a storage offering as well, in addition to solar. So that is a third-party ownership model as opposed to a loan model, which is the Smarty loan. But we continue to plug away and support different channels of access to capital. Let me turn to Mackie on multifamily, any new multifamily.
Yeah, we already spoke about our solar and storage work, which combines energy efficiency in the case of master metered properties. We also have our longstanding Lime product, which Capital for Change offers with capital backing from us and some other lenders. This product is well integrated into the utility multifamily offerings. Our capital arrangement with the Capital for Change expires in a few weeks. So we're going to our board on Friday to seek a 1-year extension of that. Capital for Change is also interested in expanding Lime applicability to new construction. We got to work out some details around that, so that won't be part of our board ask on Friday. But we're going to continue that conversation with Capital for Change and hopefully bring that to our board for approval in the near future.
Excellent. Thanks, Mac. Any questions, comments there? Becca, please.
Hey, thanks. I just wanted to ask a quick question on the single family side. I know at the end of what was last year, 2024. I know what year it is. We no longer were able to offer through the CNL&M programs a 0% interest, limited interest loan for some HVAC upgrades. And so I know we're putting everybody over to the Smart E-Loan now. Just wanted to hear if you had seen any kind of increase in usage of the Smart E-Loan due to that, how you were handling it, and then maybe even some thoughts and feedback from the utilities if they had any on that transition as to how it's going.
Good question, Becca. I was looking to see if maybe one of our team members is on. Let me see. I see you, Madeline. Maybe you can provide some context. I know the Smarty loan volume has increased. So I assume that what was happening over here in the heat loan is probably happening over here, there maybe. But outside of having my team, let me see, Madeline, maybe you have something. If not, I'll come back to you, Becca, on that, have my team take a look.
Sorry, my internet was kind of breaking up there, and I didn't hear the full question.
So the question was around the heat loan expiring in 2024, which was a 0% loan. Are we seeing underneath the Smarty loan an expansion of, help me, Becca, I think heat loan related measures, which I assume is weatherization, probably more efficient heating systems.
Yep. Yeah, I think it's primarily HVAC. Yep.
Right. So I would actually say that the under Smarty for the last few years, the majority of our loans have been heat pumps and HVAC and weatherization related improvements kind of anyway. So we do anticipate seeing kind of more volume as projects are about to expire with Capital for Change before they come over to Smarty.
Okay. But we haven't necessarily like overwhelmed you with
No.
too many. Okay, great. All right.
No,
That's what I
not
really
yet.
wanted to know. Awesome. I love it.
Yeah.
And I was just going to add, I think we saw a run in towards the end of the year. Because a lot of customers had to get their applications in by December 31st. So we're still processing loans that for installs then through Capital for Change through end of first quarter. So I'm thinking it's going to continue to pick up as you described. You're spot on.
Oh, I got you. No, I didn't realize the transition time. So thank you. That's helpful.
Yep.
Well, great question. Any other questions? All right, gang, we covered a lot of ground there. Let me see if there's any public comment.
Brian?
Yeah, please, John.
I had, since we have a little bit of time, I didn't want to crowd the agenda because I asked a lot of questions, but I just wanted to say that I'm not able to get over to the legislature very much because of my disability, but I talk with legislators and I also talk with Aziz and Allison from from the Connecticut Roundtable. And anyways, the reports about James DeSantis and the work that he does over the legislature are like 100% positive, and he's really doing meaningful work there in terms of helping, among other things, explain all these energy issues to people who are not conversant in this stuff. It's a complicated field. And so it becomes real difficult sometimes for people to really understand what they're considering in terms of bills and that type of stuff. At any rate, James is a great asset to the Green Bank. It really does a great job, and I just wanted it to be noted. Thanks.
John, thank you for that comment. James Bryan is listening. We'll make sure that we forward him this part of the discussion.
John.
But it's much appreciated, yeah. And we will on Friday, John, when we have our board meeting, go into other things that are, even outside the energy realm, that are in the environmental infrastructure realm, where you can see more of the things that are going on, the governor's bill and the like. But yeah, James is certainly on it and has been just incredible up there at the Capitol. All right, any other public comments? All right, let me see if they got a motion to adjourn today's meeting of the Joint Committee.
So moved.
Great, thank you, John. Is there a second?
Do we have to stay if there's no second? What
I was like,
happens?
can I second? I think I can second.
You can. I've always wondered that, John. And you were, all right, all those in favor say aye.
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 Aye, all right. Opposed? Abstentions? All right, gang, thank you. That was a great
All right,
meeting.
take care.
Everyone, have a good rest of the week.
It's a good meeting.
Bye-bye.
Thanks all.